Welcome to AskPsychSessions with Marianne Lloyd, where we ask some of the best teachers we know questions from you, our audience. If you have a question or an idea for a conversation, please visit bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. That's bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. All one word, all lowercase. And here's our next question.
Today I'm here with Chris Garris and Bethany Fleck from Metropolitan State University in Denver. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So before we get into why I called you here today, could you just give a little info on what Metropolitan State is like and what you usually teach? And we'll go in alphabetical order. So Bethany, could you go first?
Sure. So I teach mostly courses in the Human Development and Family Studies major. That major is housed alongside the psychology major in the Department of Psychological Sciences. We are a pretty large department. We serve a lot of students. We're a large public state school. We're located right in the center of Denver. So it's also commuter, I should mention. So a lot of students coming on and off campus in a typical year, typical semester. And we have, let's see, I don't have the exact statistics in front of me, but we serve a lot of students of color. We are a Hispanic serving institution, and our average age is a little bit older than your typical college age student. So I think the last time I looked, the average was like 24. That's a little bit about us. I teach, again, in the human development major. So my courses are educational psychology and cognitive growth and development, human growth and development, child psych, adolescent psych, infancy. So kind of in that developmental range.
Great, thanks. And how about you, Chris?
Yeah, I think Bethany hit on most of the information about our institution and department, so I won't repeat that. I am a social psychologist. I've been at MSU Denver for 6 years now, and I study topics related to culture, and lately I've been delving into a lot of political topics, political thinking, political decision making, and now online education.
Great. Well, yes.
Chris kind of pulled me in on this project, but I've done a lot of work in the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning before. It was his brilliant idea that we should seize the moment and collect data. But I guess the SOTL realm is new for Chris, right?
Yeah, this is not my literature. I've learned a lot about online education throughout the writing of this manuscript and doing this research.
Yeah, so maybe let's talk a little bit about that. I saw, I must have seen an STP listserv or a Facebook post that you were collecting some data last semester when we did this kind of quick pivot from, I think, just about all of us, from being in the classroom to everyone needing to go to remote distance online learning. And I was hoping that you would maybe talk a little bit about what you found and ways that might be able to help those of us starting fall semester or fall quarter have it be, maybe a little more successful than the spring might have felt.
Sure. I mean, I can just get started with a little bit of the background information, and then maybe Chris can take over with some of the results. He, again, is the brilliant one that decided we should seize the moment and see what our students were thinking about this sudden and crazy pivot that we all had to make to completely online from face-to-face. And you received an email when we were asking for faculty to send the survey out to their students because we really wanted to get a sample that was a national pool, not just students from our institution. And when you look at the numbers in the manuscripts, there are a lot of students that came from MSU Denver because we were really pushing it here. But we do have students from other schools all across the country. So thank you for paying attention to the listserv and sharing it or using that as a way to recruit students. That was helpful for us. We kind of figured in the spring that if we could design a study that we felt confident in quick enough, we could get reactions of students who are actually still either in classes or classes were just ending. So they would be still on their minds, still like fresh and relevant, and they were still thinking about what was happening and reflecting upon it. So we tried to put all of this together really pretty quickly as far as the planning goes and the data collection aspect went. Anything to add, Chris?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that just to emphasize that this was like a whirlwind of
Mm-hmm.
collecting data, it really was at this moment where we had just started transitioning. It was over spring break, and after spring break is whenever we were really going to start online, being fully online. And yeah, and we were just frantically creating the materials and getting this going because it seemed important to not ask the students after the fact, but to really ask them while they were in the thick of it. How is this going? How's this transition working? How is your instructor handling it? And not just ask them this overall, are you happy with the transition, but really try to tap into the different dimensions of course quality that they might be noticing so that we can get a better breakdown of what went well, what went less well. And turns out we didn't find a lot of nuance. Students really didn't like much that happened during that transition. But we really wanted to look at the different aspects of the transition and to get more details. And yeah, so it was really interesting. And it was really hectic during that time. But I think part of the value of this data is that it is during the semester. It was during the month of April for the most part where we collected data.
And so, yeah, so students were not particularly thrilled. So, are there things that faculty should know are, more not thrilling than others? Behaviors, activities? Do you feel like the fact that there was the summer to get a little more prepared means that things should be better?
We really hope so. And we talk about this a little bit in the discussion that this really was unprecedented and difficult and a very, very sudden and abrupt change where faculty did not have the chance to plan things out, to really think intentionally about different aspects of their course. And so we really do hope that given time over the summer or preparing for fall, knowing that you're potentially online or that you might have to pivot again quickly, that we wouldn't necessarily see decreased attitudes or ideas across some of the dimensions that we ended up measuring. So hopefully with planning and time getting ready, it wouldn't be all doom and gloom.
And Chris, did
Yeah,
you shift some things? I was going to say, like, for this semester, now that you're in fall semester, do you have like some specific changes? Did any of the data you collected inform this, or did you already have a sense about what you wish was different?
Yeah, it did. So just to piggyback off kind of what Bethany said, is that yeah, that there wasn't a lot of time, there wasn't a lot of resources available. It happened so quickly, but there was some things that worked in the class. So one of the things I mentioned that students kind of had this blanket negative perception of what happened during the transition. They found the class to be less engaging. They found the class to have less learning involved. They found it less enjoyable. They were paying less attention. They were putting forth less effort. There was a lot of negatives that happened during this transition. But the one thing that was positive out of this whole thing is that students thought that the class became more flexible. And that ended up being a really key part, is that even though faculty were unprepared and they didn't have a lot of time or resources or training, they did realize kind of the gravity of the situation and realize the way that it impacted students. And so they became more flexible, or at least students perceived them to become more flexible. And that was kind of the bright side of this data. And so that's one of the things that I really took away from this data, was that I need to be more flexible and I need to be considerate of what's going on out in the world. That even though I have my job, that doesn't mean my students still have their jobs. They might have had to pick up 2 part-time jobs. They who knows how this has impacted their lives. For parents, they might be taking care of their kids at home now. So realizing that flexibility is important, realizing that this transition is hard for students. Even though we're out of that transition of last semester and we've had a bit more time to prepare, this is still new to students. So that idea of being flexible and considerate is kind of top of my mind.
I think that's very important. We just received an email today from our provost encouraging all faculty to continue to be flexible with our students. And the provost noted that flexibility was brought up a lot in the student ratings of instruction that the university conducts every semester. And so we were encouraged just today to continue with that flexibility with our students based on, the crazy events and the new way of learning. And I think that's a really good take-home message.
Great. I endorse that wholeheartedly. I think, right, we've gotten a little bit used to things, but things are by no means normal. And that's your reminder about taking care of children at home. Certainly here, our local school district is all virtual learning. So if you may have students, it sounds like, that are kind of trying to juggle being second grade teachers and take your courses and work a few jobs.
Yeah,
that does sound hard.
Part of that is just the characteristics of who the students are at MSU Denver, and that we really do have to be more flexible because they are out there working jobs and have families and, the gamut. But since some of this data was collected in universities and institutions across the country, I think it's an important message for everybody too.
Well, great. Is there anything else you'd like to add besides, be flexible, or if you already are, keep it up, or maybe try to be even a little more?
For advice, I don't think I have more advice, but I did have one other takeaway from this study, which was where I think we found ourselves once we had this data was, what does this tell us about online education as this movement, as this, this pedagogical approach? And what does this tell us just about spring 2020? So the fact that we saw these decreasing evaluations of these courses after they transitioned to online, does that tell us something negative about online education in general? Does that say something about students don't prefer online education? Or is it really something specific about the hectic and unprecedented nature of that semester and the transition to online, specifically in spring 2020? And I think that's something that we're going to see a lot more data come out about, especially given that this semester, fall 2020, we had this huge shift to prepared online courses. So we should be able to see after this semester a much more kind of robust evaluation of online education just as a whole, and I'm excited to see that.
I agree. How about you, Bethany? Anything else you'd like to add in before we wrap up?
There were a lot of things that we measured in this study that we haven't talked too much about, but one of the things that was striking and maybe worth diving into a little more considering was just a couple differences that we found when we looked at race and the dimensions of change that we were measuring, where our African American students felt that after the courses transitioned, the courses themselves didn't have the same cultural considerations or cultural content that they might have if the course stayed face-to-face. And so I think it's important for us to remember and think about and try to integrate that content and multiple perspectives in our online teaching to make sure that we're doing our jobs, really.
That's a great point that I support, and I'll just call back that we've done some episodes recently. If you're not sure what you want to do in terms of that there's some suggestions in some earlier AskPsychSessions, as well as some of the other long-form podcasts. So thank you, Bethany. I agree that, yes, right now, even if we're a little more used to online education, that doesn't mean that the cultural piece becomes less important just because we're not in the classroom. So thank you.
Right. I'm actually going to go back and check out some of those podcasts, because now the question is then, how do we do that, and what's the best way and the best method? But just making sure that that's still an emphasis and that that's really important.
Right. And our data suggested that it impacts students differently. So specifically, it was Black students that really perceived that there was a decrease in that cultural component, not so much white or Latino students.
Right.
Well, thank you both so much for your time. This was very helpful, and all the best with this fall semester. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.